in our life. Ephesians 1 verse 21, far above all principality, power and might and dominion and every name that is named, not only in this world, but also in that which is to come. We need to remember the one who is above everyone. We lean on people, we lean on things. We need to remember to lean on the one who can help us the most. And part of his greatness is his character of humility and love, which made him step down and be trampled for us. He was above everything, and yet he stepped down below everything because of you and me, above all. I was reading a social media meme recently. This was a Christian meme, and it said, "I want to be so full of Christ that if a mosquito were to come and sting me, he would fly away singing, 'There is power in the blood.'" And we understand how important our blood is for our very life. We have an accident and we start losing blood. It's quite risky, and we rely on that for our very life. And same as our physical life depends on our blood, same as our eternal life depends on the blood of Christ. Through the sacrifice and through the effort and through the just enormous suffering that our God went through for us, he was able to lift us up. He was able to give us power. And it's just incredible to think of what he actually did for us. Jesus stepped down from heaven in order to give us power. He melts us by his love, and therefore gives us every reason for us to believe he means the best for us. And it somehow forces us or overwhelms us or behoves us, as an old English word is, to love him back, to accept him, to receive him. And it says in John chapter 1, verse 12, "As many as received him, to them he gave power to become sons of God, even to them that believe on his name." And this is a wonderful promise that we have power if we only believe. So first step, look at what he's done. Pretty simple. Second step, receive him. Third step, he gives us power to be sons of God. And that's an incredible thought. Power in the blood. As I mentioned earlier, I was in Canada for a few weeks back in January. And for those who don't know, that's wintertime over there. And a few people from Canada said, "Why on earth did you come to Canada at this time of year? There's plenty of other much nicer times." But through whatever reason, because of my wife's university and everything else, that was when we had free time. So that's when we went. And it was really cold. And we landed in Vancouver in British Columbia, which is on the west side of Canada. And a few days later, we were going to go across the Rocky Mountains to Edmonton, where we had our first concert scheduled. And we had to travel across by public transport an hour from Vancouver to Abbotsford, where the domestic flight was going to go from. And so we went across there, and then we got a call from Edmonton. The elder there, he was saying to us, it's going to be minus 35 degrees when you arrive in Edmonton. We are going to bring you some extra coats. And I was a little bit nervous at this point. And I thought, okay, thank you. When we got to Abbotsford, though, we realized there were some flights that had been cancelled, and our one was delayed. And very soon after, our flight was also cancelled due to bad weather. And so we collected our bags and started waiting in line, and we didn't know what was going to happen. But they said, don't worry, we will send you new itinerary on your email, so keep checking your email. So we saw an email come through shortly, and it said, you have a new flight. It will be on Saturday evening at 6:30 p.m., exactly when our first concert was scheduled in Edmonton. It was going to be too late by the time we got there. And I had gone through a bit already to get there, and I was in a feeling of giving up, an attitude of giving up. And my wife, she has a little bit more determination, maybe from her European background, I don't know, but she skipped the line of 100 and went to the counter and said, this is not good enough. We have an important event, important concert we need to get to. And they said, well, yeah, there's not much we can do, sorry. There is a flight earlier that day from Vancouver, but we can't arrange that. You need to do it yourself. You need to call the number. So we called the number, and we got that amazing music that they play while you're waiting, and we had to wait. And an hour later, we were still listening to that music, and we hadn't got anywhere. But the line had gone down, so we again got to the counter, and we played the music so they could hear that we had been waiting. And then they said, maybe we can find a flight. And they somehow miraculously found a flight the next morning, Friday morning, across to Calgary. Not Edmonton, but it was at least across the Rocky Mountains. And I said to my wife, well, at least that gets us across the Rocky Mountains. Maybe we can hitchhike the 3-hour drive to Edmonton. And they said, no, that's not a good idea, especially in those conditions. And they somehow found us another flight from Calgary up to Edmonton. So we went back because we had to go from Vancouver. We got there at midnight. We spent the rest of the night at the airport, and then we got on the plane early the next morning across to Calgary. All went well. And when we got there, there was white everywhere, and it was something I hadn't really seen before. Incredible scenery. And we raced all the way from one end of the airport to the other, and we were ready to hop on the next flight when they announced to us, the plane that you are going to fly on from Calgary to Edmonton is completely frozen. The engine is completely frozen. We can't start the plane. We'll need a few hours to warm up the engine. So we had to wait for quite a while. But eventually they did get the plane going, and we got there by mid to late afternoon, Friday afternoon. And we had our bags damaged, and we lost our passports, and a few other things happened, but they all came together. But the point I wanted to make is we got there in time for the concert. God heard our prayers. God understood our need, and he opened the door before us. And sometimes the doors in front of us seem to be locked shut with a padlock, but God has the key to those doors. He can open them. And we need to rest in him sometimes. It takes faith, but we need to trust him. That's what this next song is all about. You are my hiding place. Just like to read a verse here. It says in Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. That's a good verse to remember in all these situations we find ourselves in life. And I was struggling to remember this verse 2 years ago when, or 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, when I had just broken up in a relationship yet another time, and I was wondering what was going on. So much so that I prayed to God and I said, why is this happening to me? And so much I felt so discouraged and not sure about what was going on that I even wondered if he was listening. And maybe some of you have had an experience like that when you're not sure whether God is hearing your prayers, whether you're not sure whether he is even working or how he is working in your life. And I was kind of half praying, but half in a cloud, if you would like. And but God heard my prayer or knew my feelings, if you like, and he was working even so. And he is such a loving and merciful God that sometimes we're not even fully on his side or fully having faith in him, but he is still working. And I was actually doing a concert about 2 years ago in Brisbane when a lot of people came to that concert, but in particular, this particular girl came. And we never met at the concert. She liked my music. She went out with her friends to Grilled after the concert, and I went out with my friends and the sound team to Grilled. Grilled is a really good place. Do we have Grilled in Mackay? Oh, that's sad. Sad. Anyway, there's, I'm sure, some other good eating places, but we were out at Grilled at 2 different places. Of course, we hadn't planned because we didn't know each other's groups, but she recognized me as our group walked past, and she said, I need to talk to you about coming to our church to do some music. And so we discussed music and putting on a program, and eventually we got off topic and we talked about all sorts of things. And I could tell you for quite a while what happened following that, but I'll cut a long story short. And just a few months ago, I think it might be about 6 months ago, we were married, Paula and myself. Now, I'm not sure where she's gone. She was meant to be here coming up at this point, but maybe she will. Oh, here she comes. Here she comes. So just so you can see the person, the wonderful person that came into my life, that God brought into my life 2 years ago. And she is indeed wonderful. This is Paula. And you can come up here because they can see you better up here. So, yeah. We can praise God through applause. She plays flute in the orchestra over here, and sometimes she even plays with me up here, like she will do this afternoon. So if anyone would like to hear Paula on the flute, you have to come to Farley. Thank you, my dear. Life has never been the same since marrying Paula. I dress differently. I do my hair differently. Everything's changed. But a few months ago, I'd like to share, continuing the miracle and so many miracles of us coming together, we had another little miracle. While we were in Canada, we were at the Sunshine Ski Village in Banff. Has anyone heard of Banff? Quite a few of you. Yes, it turns out a lot of Aussies have heard of Banff because we were at the Sunshine Ski Village. 70% of all the staff are Aussies. And we said, what brought you over here? And they said, well, what brought you here? And of course, because we've heard of Banff. And we are going to go skiing or snowboarding, as my wife does, because that's what you do when you're in Canada. And instead of going up on the chairlift, you go up on a gondola because the mountains are so much bigger and more complex. And we start going on the gondola up the mountains, and they are so big and majestic and complex. And finally, we get to the top and we go to hop off, and the staff guy says, you've only come halfway. Really? We didn't even know. So we continued up because Paula wanted to see the top of the mountain. So we go to the top of the gondola, and from there we see chairlifts going up from there. And I said, I think we'll just enjoy this section of the mountain and we'll ski this section. And Paula, my wife, says, I'd really like to see the top of the mountain. And I hadn't been married long at that point, but I knew enough to say yes. So we continue up the chairlift. And it's really high, and you can see the ground a long way below. And I was holding myself together, and Paula says, are you okay? And I says, of course I'm okay. And eventually we get to the top when it's misty and it's getting colder and it's starting to snow. Anyway, we start skiing down, and partway down the mountain, Paula yells out something, and I go over to her, and her coat jacket has ripped. And that's where used to live her phone. And her phone was gone. And her phone had a white case as well. And of all colors you could choose, but it was gone, and it had her credit cards and pictures from all of our trip. And Paula says, you wait here with the snowboard and the skis, and I will go looking up the mountain. And when you know how many different kinds of slopes there are that we came down, we weren't that hopeful, but I waited, and an hour later she returned, and I recognized right away that she hadn't found the phone. And I said, don't worry, we'll go down and we'll go back up the chairlift, not because I felt like it, but we had to find this phone. And by that stage, it was getting close to knock-off time or closing time. Canadians didn't know what I meant when I said knock-off time. And we start skiing down very slowly. My hands were getting so cold, they were stinging. Beyond stinging, they were going numb, and I started worrying more about my hands than the phone. And I said, I think we need to go down to the bottom and see if there's a lost and found basket or whatever. And we get there, and there was nothing. And we said, well, at least can we file a missing phone report? So we did that. And then Paula says, why don't you call the number? Call my number, Canadian number. And I said, yeah, what a great idea. Why didn't I think of that sooner? And I called, not having much hope, but lo and behold, believe it or not, security answered the phone, which means they had found the phone. They had picked up the phone somewhere early on, and we believe it was an absolute miracle because it was snowing. Lots of people were skiing down, and but yeah, we thank God for that little miracle. And surprisingly enough, that slope is called Angel Slope. So an angel must have been assisting to find the phone. I just want to mention God cares about the big things and the small things in our lives. And I just want to say, great is the Lord. When I was 15 years old, I owned a number of horses, and my passion and primary goal was to be a horse breaker and trainer and breeder, and I loved horses more than anything else. And I'd been learning violin for a while, and a few different friends were advising me against the idea of going into horses, and to this day, I can't understand why. At the time, I was very frustrated because that was my entire passion and goal. And they said, perhaps you should be doing something that is more useful or profitable or helpful to the world. And these things would frustrate me, but somehow there was some kind of conviction from God, I think, saying that they had a point. There was a point to what they were saying. And then I remember a story about someone who had a desire and passion for one thing, and God was calling him to something else. And he prayed and he said, the only way for me to change is if you change the desire in me. And so I thought, well, maybe I need to pray this prayer, because there was no way that I would just do something different while I loved horses so much. So I prayed and I said, if it's your will for me to do something else, you need to change the desire. And a few weeks